first keynote is the keynote of C. The color is red, resonating at the base of your spine. The second keynote is D, relating to the color orange and resonating at the genital center, several fingers below your navel. Third keynote is E, the color is yellow, resonating at the solar plexus. Fourth keynote is F. The color is green, resonating in the chest center in the heart chakra. Keynote G, color is blue, resonates in the throat center. resonates in the third eye center in the middle of your forehead. Keynote B, violet, resonates at the top of your head. If you haven't already done so, take an inventory of how you're feeling right now. Become aware of the subtle flow of energy throughout your body. Notice how good it feels when all your chakras are aligned and balanced. And when you're ready, take a deep breath and come back to normal waking consciousness. Fully relaxed, refreshed, and renewed.
Welcome to our next presentation for the Sound Healing Conference. Our next presenter is Stephen Halpern. Welcome, Stephen.
Well, thank you, David. A pleasure to be here.
Stephen is a Grammy-nominated recording artist, author, researcher, and pioneering sound healer. His landmark brainwave biofeedback and Curlian Biofield research documented the healing effects of his mindful meditative music compared to classical or other familiar compositions. His music is used worldwide in alternative medicine and massage therapy centers, hospitals, hospice, corporate wellness programs, schools, and with ADD, ADHD kids and adults. His website is stephenhalpernmusic.com. So what have you been up to these days?
Well, like everyone else, doing a lot of online communication and connecting with people out internationally. Been working on some new videos to bring the music that people now go to on YouTube. And with the whole streaming music revolution, it's really been a big change for someone who began career with vinyl LPs and then CDs and tapes and now beyond digital downloads into the streaming playlists and Pandora and Spotify, etc. So I've been working more on music that immediately gets people into a higher state of coherence and resonance by combining some of the factors that we'll be talking about today in different musical settings, combining what I call Earth's brainwave and the Schumann resonance with Mother Nature's organic entrainment, the natural pulse and resonance of the soothing surf of the ocean. And of course, like you, working with brainwave entrainment technology tones that combine with the music that I do to take people who've never meditated and give them that experience of meditation instantly. And as you know, the beauty of brainwave entrainment is that it's an automatic response. So I've been taking that information, putting it into different contexts, working on my memoir, and that's been taking some time, and really collecting some of the things that I've done, many of the things I've done over the last 45 years, some of which even I forgot, but many of which I just didn't know I still had clippings from, and media coverage and articles that I've written that now I see showing up in so many other places, but the concepts that I pioneered back in the early 70s, working with the mentors that I worked with, really is coming out into the public domain, and like the work that you're doing at the Institute, really taking the promise and the potential and the reality of sound healing out to the public in ways that they can use and immediately apply in their own lives, which is more important than ever now in terms of enhancing our immune system function in the age of COVID.
Cool, cool. Also, you had a video on Gaia. Actually, they did a whole little compilation on you, right?
They did. That was a couple of years ago, and we did the interview for about 2 hours, which was an hour longer than they told me it would last. There was so much material that never got into the video, but when I finally saw it, when it finally came out, I was impressed at how much they did get in there, and it was a major breakthrough. That's part of their Great Minds series, and people can still check that out. It's available. And it has a lot of information as well.
Cool.
A lot of people don't know, and I'll probably get into this in my presentation, how I started in this work as a musician and the influences and the sources that I was tapping into before I was officially a sound healer. It was just something I was interested in, the ancient concepts going back to Pythagoras and Edgar Cayce in ancient Egypt. So yeah, the Gaia Great Mind series is a wonderful series, and it was really an honor to be part of that. And that's probably still the best public presentation of the work that I've been doing that's available anywhere.
Cool, cool. So I got the big question for you. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do to help people on the planet, especially with sound?
With the sound.
But anyway, really.
Right. Well, certainly involving sound, and this goes back to one of the Star Trek ideas with the tricoder. If we could tune in and had the technology to find out what frequencies were missing, not just from our voice, but just to scan the body and have a way to get you what you need that day to bring you into more full balance and harmonic completeness, that would be one way. In the meantime, and make that available, now we see that the technology is probably going to come online. So there may be a central way that one could tap in that you, it's like sonic biofeedback. But in a sense, that's what I began with my first recording, basically Chakra Suite, to give resonances that tune up the chakras and that people can use in their own home. In the past, you had to buy an album or a CD or whatever. Now you could go to the website, you could go to your playlist, and you could get music. And the important thing that I have been working to remind people of is that the technology doesn't work if you don't use it. So the important thing is to really educate people and to motivate them to make use of the tools, to show them the research. And this is why I've always been so supportive of the work that you've been doing with the Globe Institute, the Sound Healing Institute, to get this information out there, to get it into hospitals, but also because most people are not going to hospitals right now unless they have COVID, to make it available in their homes.
Right.
And, early on, that was why I was shunned by the music industry, because I was dealing with health and healing, and that was not part of the music industry. When I started, I got comments like, "Where's the beat? Where are the words? We're not about health. We're into entertainment." In fact, I'll just mention briefly, when my Deep Alpha album got a Grammy nomination, Billboard and the Grammys called me up and said, "You spelled entertainment wrong on the album cover," because it says brainwave entrainment music. And I said, no, there's a concept called entrainment, which they didn't even know about. I said, "You're in the music biz. How could you not know about entrainment?" Well, that's not part of their reality. Well, it was after Deep Alpha. And that's been the ongoing work, is to bring this information out there and to have people know to use it. And coming from New York, being a type A individual with adult ADD on a certain, small level, I want things that work quickly. I don't want to wait 20 minutes to get relaxed. I want relaxation and high coherence in my brain waves to happen virtually instantaneously. So that's a lot of what I've been working on over the last 45 years, and
So
will continue to do so.
I've just was printing out these quotes from famous people to put on our windows, and this one I have here from Pythagoras, and it says, "The highest goal of music is to connect one's soul to their divine nature, not entertainment."
Well, where did you get that one? I've never heard that one, but
Uh,
we said, and how many people with Pythagoras is so interesting. We have all these stories, but basically, if you shared the information that you learned in the secret mystery schools, you got killed. So that's how they kept it secret. But the quote is a great quote, whether it was him or somebody else, and that's the true ancient origin of music. It was a divine art, like all the muses, all the arts were a way to connect with the divine. And over the last thousands of years, it became more entertainment, and then was a way of distraction for God. Who else has great quotes like those? Hazrat Inayat Khan. Music as a distraction to take us away from the divine, away from God, away from ourselves, paying attention to the musician as God, Clapton as God, etc. And R.I.P. Eddie Van Halen as a guitar god. My early training was, just as you said, using the arts, using the healing art of music to bring us back into attunement and connection with the divine, with God. So Pythagoras was my first ideological patron saint.
Cool. So tell us about your presentation.
Well, we're going to be covering areas of brainwave entrainment, subliminal affirmation, looking at some of the ancient manifestations of sound healing in Egypt, the hypogeum in Malta, some of the structures and the sounds that shaped harmonics in a way that affected our own human instrument. And we'll also be talking about what I perceive as a breakthrough in stealth sonic spiritual technology that is afforded by the streaming platforms like Pandora and Spotify, where millions of people can hear the same piece of music at the same time. And I'll discuss what's happening to all our brainwaves in the context of what Rupert Sheldrake proposed about 40 years ago, with the concept of morphic resonance and the 100th monkey effect. And I think now that is much more of a reality than ever before.
Cool. Okay. I can't wait. Go ahead and begin. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Okay, well, good afternoon and hello, everyone. Now, what I'm saying, there we go. Okay, so the screen is changing. Okay, so what I would begin with was just having you close your eyes a second and taking a deep breath and just become aware of the sounds around you. Be aware of what you're hearing. If there's a mechanical noise, if you're watching this outside, do you hear the sounds of nature? Being aware of the soundscape is one of the simplest sound meditations that can quiet the mind. One of the things that I learned early on was how busy most people's minds are. The ongoing chatter, the monkey mind that is referred to in Buddhism and many Eastern spiritual traditions. Focusing on sound, on one sound, or the soundscape around us is a wonderful way to quiet the mind. Now, in my own evolution as a musician, I came up as a jazz musician learning about improvisation and learning all the rules and the scales and which notes to play with which chords and which harmonic progressions would have this effect, or another one that would have a different kind of effect. And at a certain point, I left all that behind. But to get to the point that I really was initiated into the field of sound healing, I came up through learning about notes. And the background was the more notes you can play, the faster you can play as a trumpet player. Also, the higher you could play, the better you were considered to be as a musician. The whole concept in classical music of virtuosity, of playing the little black dots written on by dead white composers on white paper with black lines and black dots, is great on a certain level, but what was left out was heart, was the coherence of the heart, was the love vibration. And one of the great people who brought that out into the world, who I met early on when he was coming out into the public, was Dr. John Diamond, whose first book was called Behavioral Kinesiology, and nobody bought it until they changed the name to Your Body Doesn't Lie, dealing with life energy in music. And the concept that the state of the performer, the emotional state, the physical state of the performer, would have an enormous effect on the impact and the healing impact of the music that they played. In other words, if the notes were right, but the energy was wrong, it wouldn't serve the higher purposes of connecting you with your own higher self, with your own divinity, with your own spiritual essence. And that was a major breakthrough. But I had my first introduction to the healing powers of music, reading about the life and the teachings, the secret school, mystery school of Pythagoras in ancient Greece, the healing temples in Egypt that Edgar Cayce was writing about and gave readings about. And I always had little past life flashes with that, but I assumed that that was just wishful thinking. Over the years, some of the psychic readings and information I've got from other sources has been that my connection was much more real and direct with some of those contexts, but that's another workshop. What it did for me, though, was to set me, even in college, with a desire to know everything I could find out about the healing powers of music. And I created the first elective series of courses at the University of Buffalo that were not offered, but were reading courses. I read every book that was available in libraries and private libraries. There weren't that many in 1968 and 69, but I was also praying to hear the music that Pythagoras was talking about, that Edgar Cayce was talking about, that would be relevant in the mid 20th century. Now, this was 1968. There were a lot of other kinds of music going on, and I was into a lot of that. Things worked out in November 1969 when my hot jazz rock band was recording in New York, and for legal reasons and various other reasons, the session fell apart. I had 2 weeks before I had to go back to graduate school to start my self-engendered program of cross-cultural transformational uses of music and healing and higher consciousness. No one had ever done a program like that, and I got the support of some of my faculty advisors to do that, and was all set to be doing that, but I had a chance to fly out to California for 2 weeks to check out the music scene in San Francisco area. And in that 2-week period, I was guided to go down to Santa Cruz, and my last hitchhike ride brought me up into the mountains outside of Santa Cruz. Make a long story short, I was guided to a meditation area that was a known power spot. I didn't know it, but my fingers started tingling amongst towering redwoods, a sacred redwood grove. And I went into a spontaneous deep meditation where I started hearing music that I had never heard before, with an instrument, a kind of a keyboard instrument that I had never seen or knew about, playing that kind of chime-like crystalline music. It was kind of like crystal bowls or Tibetan bowls, but played by a keyboard. And when I came out of meditation, where I also heard the voice saying, "This is your life's mission. This is the music that you've been praying to hear. Your job is to bring it out in the world." Well, as a starving, graduate student with no real income, there was no way to work with that. And indeed, I wound up connecting and being mistaken for a job applicant to the sister organization of Esalen Institute called Bridge Mountain Foundation. And I was invited to audition for the staff since they thought I was applying for a staff position. Went to the meeting, went to the wrong building. No staff were there, but there was a piano. I sat down, went into trance, and started channeling the music that I had just been hearing. About 10 minutes later, people came into the room. I heard some rustling. They were all meditating, doing yoga. And then one of them coughed, and the spell was broken. And they said, "Who are you? What is that music you're playing?" And that was the beginning of my new life. I was hired and gave up my graduate fellowship back in Buffalo, stayed in California. And the beauty of that place was not only did I, for the first time ever, have access to a piano keyboard, not just a guitar or a trumpet, which were my main instruments, but I had 4 hours a day after I would do my chores on the staff to just sit and be with the music and let the music come through me. So that was how I learned how to play this kind of music, which would have a very specific effect on people. But every weekend, a workshop, a seminar would be conducted by some of the leaders in what was called the Human Potential Movement, and people like Dr. John Lilly, Dr. Stanley Krippner would come through during that first month, and the staff would say, "Oh, you got to listen to Halpern's new music." And they would listen and say, "Yes, very nice. We see subjective evidence that this is having a relaxation effect and a healing effect. But if you want to be taken seriously, you have to do scientific research." And I said, "I'm a musician. How do I do that?" He said, "Well, you need to hire people to do biofeedback research." And I said, "Great, I have no money. How am I supposed to do that?" And Dr. Krippner said, "There is a new program starting at Sonoma State College called the Humanistic Psychology Institute, and we would love to have someone like you do research. We have the largest biofeedback equipment in Northern California, only exceeded by UCLA. And if you apply, I will guarantee that you get in." I applied, I got in, and that was the beginning of my graduate studies, meeting virtually all the leaders of the human potential movement in 1969 and 70 and 71. But more than that, as part of my master's degree program, my advisors assisted me in creating a bulletproof experimental design with placebo-controlled double-blind study using first brainwave analysis, GSR analysis, galvanic skin response on the surface of the skin, and then ultimately Kirlian photography that had just recently become available. This is now in 1973. Dr. Irving Oil and Dr. Krippner just come back from Moscow, where the first international Kirlian photography conference was held. They brought back schematics. Dr. Krippner hooked me up with the one of the only two devices in the US, and I hired that laboratory to research my music, the new music that I was composing, compared to the most relaxing classical music as verified by the Music Therapy Association. So I said, let me take their most relaxing music, compare it with mine, let's see the results. And the results were extraordinary. So remarkably different. My, basically the music that is now part of Chakra Suite, Keynote C, first chakra, elicited so much more of a healing, balancing effect within seconds that we could see the brainwaves would shift from random beta brainwaves into high amplitude synchronization of the right and left hemisphere in the deep alpha state. The Kirlian image would change into one related to healing and balance. And one of these scientists, Randy Fonts, who was also featured in the breakthrough book, The Secret Life of Plants, worked with Marcel Vogel and Cleve Baxter using their technology, was also part of what we're working with, said, this is no longer just your graduate research project. This is your life. And you know, you have those moments in your life, many people do, where you know your life has just changed, but you don't know how it's going to come about, but you just know from that moment forward, you have a different purpose, you have a mission. And at that moment, I knew what the mission was. It took a couple of years for the first recording studio to open in the San Francisco area that an independent can record in. In fact, that's where I met David Gibson at the Music Annex, the first incarnation of that in San Jose, the first multi-track studio that an independent who was not licensed to Sony or Warner Brothers or a major label could book time in and do a recording. So on January 4, 1975, I was his first client, and I recorded my first version of what is now available as Chakra Suite. And we have, let's see where the album went. Here we have. And in fact, I featured the cover from my research, which was a Kirlian photograph of a leaf. And I knew so little about business or marketing that I didn't even have my name on the cover. Unfortunately, that meant that people couldn't figure out what was going on. And in fact, when you turn the album this way, many magazines would not accept the album for advertising. Many bookstores would not carry it because they said it's a pornographic cover. And there's still a website that you could go right now and look at the obscene pornographic cover that Stephen Halpern had on his first album. So I had to change that. And that became, with a variety of things, back when there were LPs, became Spectrum Suite. And that cover would shift over the years. And the reason my initial title, which was Chakra Suite, had to change to Spectrum Suite is chakras were basically unknown at that time. And stores and people would say, chocolate? What flavor? We don't know what chakras were. This is before yoga became mainstream. So I worked with the electromagnetic spectrum, where I was relating the historic and the vibrational frequencies of the chakras with the 7 keynotes of music. So we have the 7 chakras, the 7 keynotes of music, and the 7 musical tones. I was not the first person who invented that correlation. And this is an ancient realization, going back to Sir Francis Bacon and the Rosicrucians and many other spiritual traditions. But I was the first person to put a soundtrack to it. And that became my first album when there was nothing else like it. You couldn't go to Tower Records or Discount Records and buy it. So I went, put them in my trunk, and went to those stores, went to New Age bookstores, and was told, we're a bookstore. We don't sell healing music. And at the very first bookstore I went to, as I'm speaking to the store manager, a little old lady comes by and says, ooh, music for relaxation, meditation? I'm looking for that. Could I buy that album? And she bought the album right out of my hand. And at which point the store manager said, well, I better take a dozen of them. And I took that information to other stores and became the first person to market healing meditation music in stores, and started a national distribution of music where music was never sold before. So a lot of people don't know that that was part of the history. And then, of course, for 40 years or so, healing, New Age meditation music was set up a whole alternative market for music that never existed, that existed outside of the official music industry stores. So that was a real breakthrough. But I'm still needing to promote the music and to explain to people what is going on. What is this whole concept of sound healing? So I would call up radio stations and TV stations, and most of them would say, we've never heard of that, but sure, come on. And I learned to communicate concepts about chakras, about brainwaves in a way that no one else had ever been. I was invited on the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder and became the first person to tune up America's chakras late night on TV, live, playing my Fender Rhodes electric piano. And it was a breakthrough moment. And that was the first time millions of people had heard music for meditation, had heard the chakras. More importantly, they had the experience that they could feel something special happening. And that was what really opened up the field, inspired a lot of other people to begin working in the field. And that's part of what I've been doing ever since. Now, over the years, from that first research, I was mentored by some people that many of our viewers may know about. People like Dr. Marcel Vogel, who did a lot of work with crystals, an IBM scientist. The great researcher and inventor, Itzhak Bentov, who was a personal mentor. We were able to use some of his proprietary medical devices, such as a micro-motion gauge that we could put on the surface of the skin to check resonances of the chakras when the individual keynotes were played. So people say, well, how come you have C as the keynote for the first chakra? I said, because we have medical equipment that proved that on at least one level of reality, that frequency resonates physically the area of the first chakra, and so on up through the second chakra, third, fourth, fifth, each relates to a keynote. This is not the only relationship, but it's a fundamental biological and also now spiritual correspondence that is the basis of the album called Chakra Suite. Now, when I was working with that, and just to have a quick picture, so this is now the album. So you can see from a classical tradition, we have the 7 chakras, the 7 colors, and the 7 keynotes. And no one had ever put a program like that together. I was doing this in concert and in workshops at major conferences in Canada, at the Symposium for World Humanity, the Parliament of World Religions in Chicago in 1993. And it was really a way to get the information and the experience out to people. This was when, if you weren't there in person, there weren't videos available. You couldn't go online to see it now. Now it's available on YouTube, and you can get a healing chakra balance just by tuning into my YouTube channel and selecting the chakra suite, chakra balancing. But as we went on, and from those early days, I was also introduced to several other concepts. One was brainwave entrainment. Before the work of Robert Monroe and the Monroe Institute got out into the world, I was privy to some of the information, and on some of my early albums would have a song or two that would use brainwave entrainment to heighten the results. In 1991, I was interviewed for a special program on New Age healing paradigms on CBS 48 Hours. And in the studio, I recorded a new piece of music, and then I showed the producer and the on-air host how by changing the brainwave entrainments, I could take the same piece of music and really amplify the meditative effects or make it lighter, and then also how I could virtually put them asleep by using delta wave frequencies. They were blown away. They said, oh, this is going to amaze the public, and I thought we had a major breakthrough going on. Then a little thing called the Gulf War happened. The program was postponed a couple months, and the producer that I was working with and that was in charge of that program was fired. A new producer came in and says, I don't want to put any of this good stuff out there. So all the best information was left on the cutting room floor, on the editing room floor. There's still a little bit that did get out to the public, but the best comments and the information about how entrainment works. So let's just go for a moment right now. There's a couple concepts that I want to share with you about how your physical body and your mental body respond to sound. So in the area of entrainment and how we respond, I break it down into two areas. There's gross physical entrainment, dealing with rhythms that we can hear and the heartbeat, and more subtle responses in terms of brainwave rhythms. And I'll address that right now. So if I snap my fingers, if you are feeling your pulse, you can feel your pulse or your heartbeat speeding up virtually instantaneously as the speed of the external rhythmic stimulus is increased. And then as I slow it down, you can feel how quickly this frequency following effect takes hold. Well, that's on the physical body. That's why fast music is played on so many commercials and is desired to give you more energy or to speed you up. But for healing and relaxation, that's typically the last thing you want. Healing, many different scientists have done a lot of research that healing takes place where the brain, where the heartbeat at the max is 60 beats per minute. That's in the relaxation zone, and down to very often considered about 40 beats per minute. So if you're higher than a relaxed heartbeat, your body can't make most effective use of its innate healing energies and systems that have been biologically pre-programmed to bring us into a healing state of being. Now, in a brainwave sense, a similar thing happens, although I can't snap my fingers, but and I know, David, you probably go into this in your program, we can add tones in the right and left channel that are very subtle, mixed into the music. So basically all you hear with my albums is the music, but very subtly your brain can decode the subtle pulsations, and by dialing in whether I want 12 cycles per second or 10 cycles per second or 8 cycles per second. In fact, I set up a research program for myself about 12 years ago. What does it feel like to meditate with your brain waves at 12 cycles per second or 10 or 8? And then I stepped it down. I took the same piece of my own music, so I own the rights, and I added brainwave entrainment of 8 cycles per second, 7 cycles per second, 6, 5, 4, When I added 3, I fell asleep. So I said, that's another album, that's music for sleep. But as I was stepping down, for me, when I got to deep theta, I got to a very deep state where I started hearing music in my head, which I don't usually hear. And when I was at 8 sockets per second, I felt a very strong alignment and entrainment with the same vibe that I feel, that many people feel when they're looking at a beautiful sunset, when they're out in nature, when they're by a lake, when they're by the ocean. This is the earth resonance, known as the Schumann resonance. And it was a way of bringing nature into the recording studio and into people's homes through music and entrainment. So this was a major breakthrough. And then I had another breakthrough. What happens if I record music when I am in these specific brainwave states? And that was the origin of my 2 first albums, Deep Alpha and Deep Theta. And that was, and Deep Alpha was the one that did phenomenally, and much by a delightful surprise, get a Grammy nomination. And I believe part of the reason was the people who listened got into an alpha state so quickly, they got high without smoking anything, and they felt how good that felt. And a lot of them voted for that as Grammy. Should have won the Grammy that year, according to many people and my own feeling. But being nominated was an honor on its own. And for me, I found that by playing a soundtrack that I had the entrainment tones and what I consider to be my own favorite psychoactive music, ambient soundscape bed, it would get me into a state where music would begin flowing through my fingers. And I played things I've never played before. And one of the reasons those albums are so powerful is the state-related experience. I am in a deep alpha and a deep theta state when I am recording that music. And that is recorded not just in the old vinyl, old magnetic tape in the old days, but even digitally, it gets recorded into Pro Tools, into the computer. And so you have not only my own state of consciousness, but the sonic entrainment tones that virtually guarantee a positive experience in the deepest states of consciousness when people listen. And it happens within seconds. Again, I mentioned, coming from New York as a type A individual, before the concept of ADD and ADHD were related, when the music therapist said, if you listen to this album for an hour of classical masterpieces, you'll be relaxed. And I would say, excuse me, folks, I come from New York. I don't have an hour. I want my relaxation and I want it now. This was even before MTV was around. What do you have that'll get me there in a minute? And they said, there's no music that's available that can get you into a relaxation, balanced brainwave state in a minute. And I said, yes, there is. I showed him my Curlian research, my brainwave research from 1973, which was then affirmed in 1977 at the laboratories in London of Dr. Maxwell Cade using the mind mirror. Got the highest results of any music that they tested. And that was the groundwork upon which I based the rest of my career. Now, in the early days, I didn't realize that there was another very important concept that I would typically bring in midway through my workshops. And this was the concept of the hidden stress factors in most music. And what do I mean by that? It's the anti-mindful music aspect of most music. Let me give you an example. If I sing this very familiar pattern, watch what happens in your body, observe what happens in your mind, and if you're alone, you may want to just audibly respond to what you're hearing. This will take about 10 seconds. Watch what happens. So I'll just sing the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Can you hear that last note in your head? How many of you are holding your breath, waiting for me to sing that final do. I call that the scaleless interruptus phenomenon. We've been culturally conditioned to respond to familiar patterns in music that sets us up to predict and to anticipate where the music is going in the future, which is great for most music. It's great for entertainment factors. It's great for enjoying the music. It's not great if you're trying to meditate. It's not great if you're trying to empower and support your own internal healing energies, because you're out of balance. You're always paying attention to the future. You're never in the present moment. Relaxation only happens in the present moment. Relaxation can't happen when you're waiting for the resolution of a melody, of the resolution of a chord progression. This is the basic of Western classical music. And in graduate school, my professor said, "You are violating every rule of Western classical music." And I said, "You're right." And because I am doing that, my music is more powerfully relaxational and healing than what you guys have been dealing with for hundreds of years. That was music for 1800 or 1700. We need music for the 20th century, now the 21st century. That's what I'm doing. And they said, well, and then they had the results and they said, okay, well, you know, you've done all the work, you've proven what you're doing, you've grounded it in research, we'll have to give you a degree. And that was how I got my master's degree. Some years later, I worked at the same, did work at the same university as John Gray, Men Are from Mars, Women from Venus, and got my PhD continuing this aspect. But the concept was that these hidden stressful factors that you don't recognize are part of most music keep you out of the state where your brain waves get into a synchronized, balanced, high coherent state. So that was a major breakthrough, that there is stress when you think you're listening to music for relaxation. Where else would that so important is in trying to study. The first books on super learning reference my music in addition to the classical Baroque music, but only the Baroque, the adagio portions of Baroque. And I would have been a bigger part of the book, said the authors, except their editors wouldn't let them talk about my music because it wasn't classical music, and classical Baroque music was what they were selling. But they admitted to me privately that my music scored higher than the adagio portions of Baroque. Many people would see those headlines and would go out and buy a Baroque album, which had 3 fast portions and 1 slow portion. Then a couple of years ago, some people were doing anthologies of just the slow portions of Baroque music. The problem was that some of the performances were good and some were stressful in their own right, and they were, you know, irritating compositions. So, but the field of super learning started using music as a modality to help people get into a balanced state where you could learn faster, you could absorb the information and retain it better. Now, at that point, I was also speaking at the International Suggestopedia conferences, the International Accelerated Learning conferences. I met some people who said, well, you know, you may not know that your music is very helpful for autistic children and people who are ADD and ADHD. I said, I had no idea. And after my presentation, a family came up to me and shared that their hyperactive young Johnny, when they would play my album Chakra Suite or Ocean Suite or Comfort Zone, would mellow him out. I had other teachers come up. In fact, the reason I was hired to speak at that conference was because entire school districts in Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming, with Kim Bevel, the super trainer consultant, was headquartered, had found that my music helps students learn faster, do homework at home, which is now so important with all the at-home learning that's going on, that it could create an optimal learning environment. Even though there were no subliminal affirmations, there was no brainwave entrainment on those albums. And even so, the integrity of the music itself would balance brains and help those individuals function better. Now, we're getting closer near the end. I want to make sure I get to this point also. So when I added the subliminal affirmations to focus your attention, to focus your mental faculties on absorbing and retaining the information, I did that first for myself as I was writing my big major book, the second book, Sound Health, which was my follow-up to Tuning the Human Instrument. I was trying to listen to classical music and no music as I was writing. And how do you know if the music isn't working? If you write the same sentence over and over, or you sit at your typewriter, this is before computers, and nothing is happening. Well, when you're reading, if you read the same sentence over and over, you know that you're getting spaced out, you're getting distracted. The music is not helping you focus your consciousness on the task at hand. I started listening to my own music, and suddenly I was able to be typing out chapters. I got the book done in time to get it published by Halpern, and this became the first major seller in the field of sound healing and sound health, long before the National Institutes of Health said, we're going to do a $20 million study on sound health. I said, yes, this is the concept, and helped plant that seed out in the world. Well, for most of recorded history, when recordings were available, starting in let's say the early 1900s, people would listen at home. You'd listen on an LP or vinyl album or a cassette, or then on CDs. Then there were digital downloads. The breakthrough that happened with streaming music has taken music from an individual experience. And yes, you could be at a concert where you're all hearing the music at the same time, but that's a limited environment. You have the people, and typically the music at those mega concerts, whether it's in a large hall, auditorium, or a stadium with 40,000 people, the music is typically rock music or heavy metal or rap. You're not looking at music that is creating a healing environment where you could go inside. You're paying attention to what's going on stage, the cult of personality of the artist as God-like figure, or goddess if it's Beyonce. And that is very consciously being included in the choreography. And going back, in fact, when I saw the Beyonce video from Coachella from a couple years ago, the mythology and the choreography and the costumes were a contemporary manifestation of what the ancient Greek mysteries and public performances were done, and also at Pythagoras's healing ceremonies, from what little we know about that, where it's putting out for everyone to see and have the identical experience at the same time. The problem is the music is taking you onto stage, not going inside. I had an experience just about a year ago at my chiropractor's office, where they have the music now on Pandora, and they play a channel so they don't have to change the CD, and it just goes playing all day. And there was some music on, there was just some nameless new age music. And then as I'm waiting for the chiropractor to come in to do my adjustment, I heard notes that I recognized, and they were track 1 of Chakra Suite, Keynote C, First Chakra. And what was significant there was not only that I didn't know that was going to be coming on, but I, number one, recognized it very clearly, but number two, I had the most powerful meditative shift in my brainwaves, which I've been trained to feel and know when coherence is taking place. And I simultaneously received the download that millions of people who are tuned into Pandora at that time are hearing the same music simultaneously and are similarly having a coherence experience. And when their brainwaves are shifting into a deep alpha state of balanced hemispheric response at 8 cycles per second, which is also bringing them into entrainment and resonance with the Schumann resonance and the basically what we consider the Earth's brainwave, the 8 cycle per second fundamental harmonic of the Earth's vibratory reality. There are other harmonics, but that is the fundamental basic harmonic. 8 hertz is also the frequency at which energy comes out of a healer's hands, as measured by the great scientist Dr. Andrea Puharich. Now, what's so significant about that is, number one, that this is the first time that millions of people who don't know that other people are listening to the same song at the same time are having the same brainwave experience. And if they're not driving, or if they're in a place where they could just take a moment to slow down and to feel what they're feeling. And I deputize all of you, the next time, if you're listening to this song or a streaming platform and this song comes on, feel what you're feeling. Take a moment, take a deep breath, allow the music to wash over you, feel what you're feeling, and you will be amazed. What came up for me is that in addition to now millions of people having the same experience, this is what Rupert Sheldrake was proposing with his theory of morphic resonance, with his breakthrough books in the early 1980s. The concept was popularized by another book called The 100th Monkey Effect. But it's a situation where when a certain amount of critical mass of consciousness happens, whether it's monkeys washing their sweet potatoes to get the sand off on one island off Japan, when a critical mass, let's say 100 monkeys, according to the book, started washing their sweet potatoes so they didn't have all the grit from the sand, monkeys on another island 3 miles across the bay started washing their sweet potatoes also. There was no physical contact. Mother monkeys did not teach their children on the other island. They taught their children and their neighbors and their tribe on island number 1. But this concept of consciousness, of a critical mass of consciousness, was a breakthrough. Dr. Sheldrake has lots of research on that. It relates also to phenomena where if a rat is going through a maze, and it takes a certain amount of time to do that, once one rat learns the maze, it's easier for other rats to go through the maze. Somehow the universe happens, activates and operates as a almost as a habit. When a breakthrough in consciousness is made, that other people or other members of that species can tap into that information field and go to a new order of functioning. In the 80s, the scientists that criticized Dr. Sheldrake said, well, if a rat or a mouse in Australia suddenly starts doing it, it's because a scientist brought mouse genes on his beard, and that somehow infected the mouse or the rat in Australia. Clearly ridiculous concepts. And ultimately, Sheldrake is one of the Einsteins of our age, I believe, many people believe, breakthrough concept. And I believe that is what is making the possibility and the potential for getting opportunities when we have, whether it's on a full moon, as the heart math people have been doing, the Global Coherence Project, where if we can get people tuned in at the same time, to meditate at the same time, as Randolph Price orchestrated back in the late 70s, when on the night before New Year's Eve, around the world, people would coordinate a meditation at 12 midnight Greenwich Mean Time, I believe it was. And then in California, it was what, 4 a.m. in the morning, some regional time. But I was playing, I was hired to, and honored to play my Fender Rhodes electric piano at the Stanford Memorial Church as the West Coast anchor of meditation to tune in. So around the world, there were millions of people meditating at the same time. Well, now through streaming music, we have the opportunity to tune into a serendipitous, synchronous, spiritual experience that I would bet Pandora, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, never considered as a spiritual benefit to individuals if we choose and know to use it and to orchestrate coherence and coordinated times, which is part of the next project that I'm talking to other online sources who have the network, that we could take, if it's 1 minute, if it's 5 minutes, where we can just tune in and be and allow ourselves to link consciousness and create a higher experience of healing and meditation for all of us. Who knows what could happen? Well, that, I believe, is one of the potentials for where sound healing can go in the future. And although it doesn't necessarily have to be live music, we can use recorded music that makes the logistics so much easier. And in the meantime, we take advantage of opportunistic opportunities when a suitable piece of music comes on. Will other music do this? We know that, in fact, with crystal bowls, people have been getting together and going full moon bowling and having meditations on the full moon night with crystal bowls. I know the Crystal Tones Alchemy Crystal Bowls organization has been promoting that for many years. Some of the other crystal bowls have been doing this. If more people do this, even if we're not all linked up, if we're all involved in the same thing, this is setting up a global resonance that is radiating out into the information field, into the atmosphere of the earth itself. And if we add our intention to raise our vibration, to enhance our spiritual attunement, to enhance our immune systems so that we're in a better position to be protected from coronavirus. Instead of waiting for a vaccine, we can self-orchestrate on the spectrum of consciousness, as one of my other great mentors, the remarkable teacher Gene Houston, has put forth. If we can do that together, we can create an opportunity that really manifests the healing powers of music, the healing power of sound, the healing powers of intention, beyond the secret for our individual benefit, but for the benefit of humanity. And that's really where I'm putting a lot of my energies now, and invite everyone to start sharing that information. Find out if there are other pieces of music that work for you, that work for others. Obviously, since I have a connection to Chakra Suite, it's not surprising that since I channeled the music, that I channeled the information of how to use that piece of music now. That's been part of my direct alignment and connection with my sources of inspiration and guidance, the angels and spirit guides and ET intelligence that I've worked with over the years. We don't talk about a lot of that. We let the music do the speaking, have the experience. But I can tell you that my career has been always one that has acknowledged the sources of my inspiration and the co-creation aspect. I move my fingers, but the inspiration comes through, which was also something that I learned from my jazz improvisation days, and that would also go back to what I learned back from my teachers in Buffalo, Jack Clark, Robert Duncan, Robert Creeley, the great American poets, that the ancient, who trace their lineage back to ancient Greece, where the musicians, the poets, the artists would actively seek to commune and to connect with their muse. And that became my initial focus in life as a musician, in my art, to connect to my muse. And when that started happening, it was a life-changing event, and has continued ever since. So that's a lot of what I've wanted to share today. David, how are we doing on time? I don't know exactly how long we
Yeah.
have to go.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got, I've been thinking a lot in the last couple of weeks here about ways to tap into the muse, right?
Yes.
Because it's interesting because, you know, there's music and there's sound that can be very cool, but there's a point when the light goes on, and all of a sudden you're in another realm, right? And it seems like that's the whole key: is how are the different ways to actually activate that light. I mean, you've already been contacted, right?
Yes. And in
Right?
fact, I just got turned on to a book by Grant Cameron called Modalities of Contact, where he
Oh,
outlines,
wow.
what is it, 50 or 100 different modalities that people have used to get into these states.
Oh, cool.
Shamanic drumming
Uh
is
huh.
one. Twirling around like the dervishes is one.
Uh huh.
Chanting, mantras, listening to crystal bowls where you have one tone,
Uh
or
huh.
if you have multiple bowls, where you don't have to worry about melody. One of the beauties of crystal bowls and Tibetan bowls is that you don't have to deal with melody and harmony in the traditional musical sense. So the brain is allowed to slow down. You can't
Right.
anticipate where the melody is going with the crystal bowl. There is no melody. But if
Right.
you listen to Tibetan bowls, when you if you just hit them or move your mallet around the end, you'll hear that wah 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 wah, the pulsations. That
Mm-hmm.
is natural brainwave entrainment that the Tibetans and the bowl manufacturers were working with for thousands of years. So they knew about sonic entrainment. They just didn't call it that.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I think also when people get into that zone more and more, then these higher energies go. Okay, you're more. There's less chaos around. We can actually contact you now.
That's exactly it. You need to quiet your mind
Mm-hmm.
to get into that state. You also need to lose your ego. For
Right.
for the musicians that I was coming up with as jazz musicians, there were a lot of spiritual musicians, and some of them knew this, but even more so in the classical field, the uh, the mental and emotional and psychological makeup was, I've practiced these scales and I've practiced this classical
Mm-hmm.
piece for 10 years and I know every note. Damn it, you would better be impressed by my digital dexterity and my ability as a great pianist or a great musician. That keeps you blocked from
Right.
getting the love vibration in. So you
Right.
need to open up and really bring that love vibration through and set the intention. And when I learned that, I had that confirmed for me after I was doing it for years. When I was at the Edgar Casey Foundation in Virginia Beach, I was doing a concert, doing a workshop. I had some time to go through their library, and I found a little book that was called Music as a Bridge that they didn't even know was in the library. And as I'm scrolling through and reading it, a little pamphlet by Dorothy Robb Winston, at the bottom of the right-hand page, it says the musician's prayer, and it starts off, Lord, let me be a vehicle through which the music that serves the highest and the best for an individual is allowed
Right.
to come through. And as I turn the page, I continue, before I'm even reading it, I was continuing to say the prayer. And how did I know that prayer? Well, I've said it thousands of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
is my take. Or I was so tuned into that. And that became a key portion of the beginning of every recording I've done. I get into that state. I set
Mm-hmm.
the intention. I set the intention of the room. I used to send out the engineers at the music annex. I said, look, I'll pay you for a half hour of studio time. Just take a break. Let me be in the room, in the studio, and just meditate and set the room for the higher vibrations to come through. And David Porter and the other engineers would say, you're not going to believe this guy. He pays us to take a break. But then they said,
Yeah.
yeah, but then as soon as the session starts, he doesn't make a mistake. He's like, he does one take and he's done, one and done. Only studio musicians in LA would do that. He does it, and he doesn't play from notes. He's improvising, and it's all right there. So whatever he's doing, it's right for him. And that
Right.
became part of the little myth that I had. We don't know what he's doing. He's a little strange, but he's in the zone.
Right.
Before, we had people talking about in the
Right.
zone, like football players, being in the zone, feeling, people getting ready to tackle them and moving another way. O.J. Simpson, when he was still a good guy, he would make these cuts that people, O.J., how did you know there was a guy going to attack you? I don't know, man. I just knew.
Yeah.
And you
It,
find that with Joe Montana and Dwight Clark. You find with so many of the great athletes, they get in the zone. LeBron James, Michael Jordan, you can see them in the zone.
yeah.
And that's how they perform at this higher level. Michael Murphy, one of the founders of Esalen, did a whole book and a study on athletes in the zone.
Hmm.
And so many of the elite athletes know how to get into that zone, but they don't talk about it. In my training, I took many marketing and sales business seminars, and some of the best consultants and CEOs said, "We know about this. In fact, many of us use your music, but we can't say that publicly because we don't want to give our competitors, that information. We want to keep our
Hmm.
competitive advantage. You are part of my
That's funny.
competitive advantage."
It's
And
cool. It's like the Native American drummer playing a
yes,
grandmother drum. There
yes,
is zero thought of doing it to be cool or to actually perform. It's all about the ceremony and helping people.
right.
And really, when you are in, that's a really cool way to lead into the zone, is to hold that intention with 100% focus so that it's really about the higher good of
That
what
is
people do.
exactly true. And just mentioning that, I flash on one of the first times I experienced shamanic drumming with my teacher uh, at dawn, bringing up the sun after staying up all night to do the archaeology of dawn in the context of Charles Olson and the ancient Greeks. And I am in my left brain trying to analyze the rhythm of the shamanic drumming, and I'm making little notes. And he said, "Stop that!" It was like Carlos Castaneda and Don Juan saying, "Shut your mind down. Just get in the experience." And when I did that, suddenly the shamanic drumming was no longer just the rhythmic pattern, but the sound started spinning around my head. At which point I understood drumming in a way that my left brain never understood. It's
Cool.
not just the rhythms, but the encompassing of sound. And when you feel the sound moving around, sound becomes three-dimensional.
Cool.
And of course, now we've had technology to bring three-dimensional sound, but that was a breakthrough. And right, it's not about ego. It's
Right.
tapping in to set the context.
Cool. Excellent. Wow, that's very cool. So tell me about your offering, your what you're going to offer for your
Well,
special offer.
I will give a couple suggestions. Number one, on my website, I have some instructional videos. I have guided versions of the chakra suite, and that is something I would recommend people going on YouTube, so it's free. We will also be offering a in-person lecture that I did at a thousand person seminar that I did about 10 years ago, where I go over a lot of these concepts. I do a guided version of the chakra suite and really give an experience that people can take home into their lives and utilize, whether for health and healing, for business, for learning. There's so many different uses of this, and it's things that you can then bring in if you're a counselor, if you're a massage therapist, if you're a healer. It's a way that you can use sound more effectively, and that will be part of the gift.
Cool. Anything else you would like to share before we close?
Well, I think we've done it. I would love to be able to play some live music right now, but uh, my uh, studio is in a different building than where my Zoom setup is, and I have always done my recording at a independent studio. That studio I worked at for 25 years after I left the Music Annex. They moved right before the shutdown, the lockdown, to Oregon. So I no longer have an engineer I work with, no longer have a studio that I've worked with for 25 years. So I'm in the process slowly of getting something where I'll be able to play some live music for individuals to tune into the energy of the moment. But right now, there is so much timeless music available on my website, on my YouTube site, and now on the streaming services that it's available for anyone to access. and it's easier than ever. So again, the important thing is take some time. And the other thing I'd mention is for healing music, it's useful to not always be multitasking. Give yourself the opportunity of just being with the music. John Diamond was suggesting that you can sit in a meditative pose or have your hands in a receptive mudra. I used to joke that when I would listen to music on my stereo, I'd lie on the floor and put my feet towards the speakers to get a different kind of soul music coming right through my feet, and that always got a little zone. And of course, the other aspect is vocal toning. Working with the elongated, I know you work with the elongated vowels, not just the O of ohm, which is a universal sound, but all the vowels. And I've always said that if you need to be on good terms with all the vowels, that if you haven't had a good vowel movement lately, after this talk, take a moment in the shower, in your car, outside in nature, do some toning, do some vocalizing, and that's an internal massage that also is a wonderful healing and balancing event. You don't have to know the words. You just have to know a vowel. What could be simpler than that?
Cool.
All right.
Well, thank you for your work, and thank you for your presentation.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you for the opportunity. God bless
Okay.
everyone. Stay safe and stay in tune. Namaste.
Take care. I'm going to play the closing video now. Oops. Go. Closing. Wow. Here it comes. Let's see if this is the right one. Oh, I can't see because of Zoom. We'll try it this way. Okay, this should be good.